I didn't take you up. I left you on there.
No.
Laurie made other mistakes on this too.
There we go.
You're on it. Okay, please stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. All right. Start with public comment. Anybody wish to? Okay, I know we have somebody coming in later.
Yeah, John should be coming later.
Okay.
From Sag Harbor.
All right, so roll call, please.
John Aldred,
Here.
Susan Vorpal,
Here.
Susan McGraw-Keeber,
Here.
Rick Drew,
Here.
Del Cullum, Brian Burns,
Here.
James Grimes,
Yes.
William Taylor,
Here.
Francis Bach.
Here. All right. Well, seems a little odd, but we'll move on to new business. Beaches, 171 Lily Pond Lane, Lewis Sander.
Yeah. I visited this site with Billy Mack a week or so ago, and it's a pretty straightforward. It's very much like Rayner. It's a stone revetment that is exposed at the moment that they're looking to cover it. If you want, I have a picture if anybody wants to look at it. Sure.
And First Coastal is doing the work?
Yes.
Do you have a history?
Of doing this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is not a new deal at all.
Are they using Georgia sand?
Well, that's probably, I can't say that for sure, but I would assume that's the case.
Will we find out? Will we know before it starts?
Does it matter?
Doesn't matter to me.
Well, just as a question of
Has-
whether or not
ha-
it's sand that is,
Has to be beach compatible
Yeah.
sand. But just so you know, we're gonna start to see a lot of these replenishment and restoration applications, just because the dredging's going on at
Right.
Georgia. And it's cost effective for the homeowners, it's cost effective for the contractors, and it's good for the trustees. This is part of the 12,000 yards of sand that we've sold this year. So yes, Susan, I would be very surprised if it was not.
just asking.
But
So I can learn.
it's not terribly relevant to whether, you get a permit or anything like that, as long as the sand is beach-compatible
right.
sand, and they're doing it.
Hey, Jim,
Yeah.
we talked about when addressing applications to make note of the Suffolk County tax map number, and I see that this one is missing.
Arlene,
I don't have it in front of me, but
if you could
I
please.
can definitely get it for you.
I certainly,
Yeah.
I don't want it to hold up. Oh, we have it. I found it. It's not on the application. All right, I have it on something else. And I would be willing to make a motion.
To approve this?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. So with regards to Suffolk County Tax Map 0301-13-11-5.3. At
Hey,
one, yep.
guys, does he have, because I asked him to put it on there, but I didn't check after, is he applying for sand fencing at the same time?
Yes, and sand fence.
Good, okay.
Yep.
All right, he did do it.
So this is at 171 Lily Pond Lane to restore the existing dune by placing approximately 2,600 cubic yards of clean beach-compatible sand on the dune. The placed sand will be graded to a stable slope, planted in with beach grass 12 inches on center, and sand fence will be erected along the toe of the dune. Do I have a second?
I'll second it. The whole area down here, all the culverts, it's a pretty
Francis, all in favor?
straightforward thing.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, 11 West End Road, Swag, permission to cross beach for dune restoration. Should we do the other thing first? No? Okay.
All right. As some of you probably remember, the conditions of the disposition of Zweig's lawsuit was they do not have to ask us to do the maintenance work, okay, and they're not. As part of the conditions of the lawsuit, they're asking for permission to cross our beaches. I personally think it would behoove us to make this first thing as painless as possible. I'd like to make a motion to approve it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and also with that, we received the final documents on the agreement. I believe the village approved their part of it, not that that matters to
Brian
us.
Matthews, he emailed us the final form of the stipulation and settlement agreement, as well as the judgment to be entered.
Everybody
I
has a
read through and
copy.
didn't notice any substantive changes, so this is the same as the discussion we had a few weeks ago regarding the settlement, and, I would agree with it. I think we're ready to move forward on this and put this one to bed.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept it as it's written.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Great. All right, education.
We received an invitation from Montauk Friends of Erin to participate in the March 24th Sunday 57th Annual St. Patrick's Day Parade in Montauk. And they'd be delighted to have us have a float or marching unit in our parade, they ask. And it's a big parade, it's very festive, so I had a thought about it. And Brian, you and I on the Education Committee
Yeah, we'll talk about it, sure.
talked about it together, and
Yeah.
I have a couple of thoughts, especially since we have the Montauk school kids who were so supportive of the ban on the intentional use of balloons. I thought it might be fun to bring them in.
Yeah, we've done it,
Some way.
yeah, we've done it in the
Put
past.
the pump out in the parade.
So,
Yeah.
I can, I'm sorry, I can share some thoughts about what we did in the past, with some fresh ideas, and we'll
Okay.
put something together. Sure.
Well, Bill just mentioned the pump-out boats too. Susan, the pump-out boats being in Montauk, maybe that's something that we want to talk about together. if we
We
wanna-
put it in the parade a couple times, but, we should just
We'll
put,
talk about it.
yeah, get it all set.
Okay, I don't see a deadline for
I have to work that day.
Okay. All right.
All hands on deck for the Montauk Parade.
It's a busy day, if you know, kind of
Busy
work.
day. When you cannot take
see.
off.
I can call Brian Matthews.
It does not have a deadline?
Well, I'm sure
they're
it
gonna
does,
wanna
we just
know.
don't
I
have
mean, the
it.
date's not
Yeah.
on here, but
Well,
we'll
they'd
talk
like,
about it.
they just like to plan the
We'll find
parade,
out
they
from
want
Brian.
They're pretty flexible.
Usually a couple of weeks.
What day is the parade? What date?
It is the 24th, which is a Sunday, and the parade
Of March.
begins at 12 noon in March, yes, March 24th. So I'll
That help you with this?
Do you think the hatchery might have something that you want to put as like a float?
They have, I'm not sure. I don't know about this year.
Yeah.
How they have in the past, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, we could think
you
of a
wanna-
message we want to
Yeah,
put out there.
all right.
I'd like to, before we move on from the parade, just take a quick moment to recognize this year's Grand Marshal, Gordon Ryan,
Yes.
enthusiastic and worthwhile member of the community here, being this year's Grand Marshal. I think it's exciting, and he's going to do a great job with it. So, Gordon, thank you for everything. We
Yes,
look forward to seeing you at the
Gordon.
parade.
Yeah, they always do a great float.
Yeah, who's going to do his float now this year?
I don't think he's gonna have one this year.
Isn't it the whole community?
He's got to walk this year.
Hey, I want to bring up something that came to my attention. I guess this is new business because we haven't talked about it before, but on the end of Settlers Landing, there's a kayak rack. You know?
It's ours.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes, your signs are there. I took pictures, my printer broke down, so I don't have the pictures with me, I apologize.
The end of Hans Creek Road you're talking about?
The end of Hans Creek,
Somebody shot it?
well, you know how there's that little marsh behind
Right.
between
Yeah.
the water? Well, what's happening is when we're having storms and flooding, the
running
kayaks,
back.
which are still there during the season, they get washed into that back
Yeah, that's
wetland
happened-
portion.
That's happened
seen
so
that,
many
yeah.
Well,
times.
people have been going back there, and, I guess it's a risk. If you fall through the ice, it could be you could find yourself in trouble. However, there were people out there trying to get the boats out of the reeds, and they were walking on the ice, and it was cracking, falling through. They were complaining. Somebody contacted me. I said I would bring it up at the meeting. They took the boats, they put them back in the racks, these private residents, and they blew off again. And now they're blowing into each other, they're damaging each other.
Yeah, but
And I guess it's...
not for nothing. They're not supposed to be there.
Well, I'll tell you, if you went down there and looked at the signs that the trustees have, they're gone. They're just plastic pieces of laminate that say various parts of a paper that were there. There's no direction, no instruction, nothing is there. It's just a little paper plastic sign that used to be there, but it's illegible. You can barely see trustee and you can barely see the word kayak in there. However, the racks are beautiful. Why people are still leaving their kayaks there at this time of the year
Well, they're
is a
not
question
supposed
to
to.
me.
Do you know,
They're
do they
supposed
have
to be-
stickers?
We should be,
Taken in.
they should be
Do you know, there's about
confiscated.
4 or 5 there, and I didn't check for
Impounded.
stickers.
Because it could just be people just using them off-season who
The weather's
don't
been
use
so
them during
nice,
season,
yeah.
because their application says they have to have them off by a certain
They
date.
look like they look like
Is
they
that
were
area be-
abandoned.
yeah.
Had they been in worse condition, I would have said that they were
Yeah, but
abandoned.
we've in the
However,
past,
they're
we've
not.
had
They're,
somebody
they're not in
impound.
bad condition, they're dirty.
Yeah.
They show that they've been there
And we
for a while.
charge people
So
to
we
get them back.
must have the list of
Correct.
people who applied for permits who
Yeah.
have their kayaks there.
Well,
and we
I think
can
years
notify
ago,
them.
we used to impound anything that was left there after a certain
Right.
date, we'd impound and
There's
put
at
in the
least
yard.
2 down on
Yeah.
Louse Point also.
You-
So should we go
We
and
should-
take a
we
look,
should-
see who has their kayaks still
I
there,
took the
notify
pictures,
them?
I can mail them to everybody, email them to us.
Should we ask the harbor masters to collect them and
They will.
bring them
Probably.
back
Yeah,
to the
typically that's
office?
Yeah, if you call down, or if one of us call down, or Arlene or Lori, Ed Michaels will take care of it.
I'll see him in the morning.
Yeah, they always do.
Louse Point, yeah.
And Smansby.
But that
They'll go around.
There's a
At the
resident
end of
that
Hand
lives
Street,
down there that brought
before they
them.
did
We
those
should
kayaks,
probably ask them to
there was
just,
like
in
20
their rounds,
kayaks
check all
stuck in
these
the
Check all
weeds
the-
there,
kayak
literally
rack
for
sites
years.
and just
Sure.
pick
And
up
is there-
anything that's still there.
And I guess this spring, when they do go back into operation, maybe we could redo those signs.
We should have
Definitely.
a real permanent sign, because those were
Or-
just
or that.
pretty much paper.
But
that were-
they should know since it's on their
Well, when they,
application.
yeah, when they get their
People that-
permit.
The people that are there with
People that
permits,
don't know,
no.
that are
Right,
using
so
them,
I'm saying if we know
perhaps,
who
I don't
has
know.
the
Yeah.
permits, just
And
tell
most of the
everybody
people, they'll
and let them know if
actually
they haven't already taken away
secure their
kayaks.
kayaks,
They
because
should.
they're afraid people are gonna steal
Let's
them.
do.
Think.
It's unusual if they don't, that they're not fastened down.
And the one metal sign, all kidding aside, somebody shot it with a
Shot it.
shotgun,
Yeah.
and you can't even read it. So we're gonna have to get a replacement for that one.
Is that the highway department that replaces them?
They've been known to
They
help
can
us
make,
out.
they did have the capacity for making signs and, yeah.
Who normally would put up the sign? Do we? We don't have any signs that I know.
Well, they do for the litter committee does to make the
Yeah.
signs for Adopt a Road.
We can,
How's your decal coming?
Yeah, we can work it out. Okay.
we can ask Stephen, I'm sure he would do it for us. If
They
not,
made the signs at the end.
yeah, I mean, they have a sign, they have a shop,
Right.
so I'm sure he would do it for us. If not, we can get them done. We got time. Yep.
So, is somebody gonna take care of, somebody gonna take care of calling?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Hey,
It's beaches.
as long as we're roaming around in new business, one of the things I did want to bring up on beaches, and Dell, I'm really disappointed that you're getting off beaches, because this was like right up your alley, is we did adopt that new sand fencing law, but it hasn't really generated a whole lot of interest. What I was thinking of is putting together a brochure, okay, that describes the methods, the procedure, the benefits of it, some nice photography. Send it to the waterfront property owners as a one-time mailing, and see if you could generate some interest in doing these things and doing them legally.
I could still do that, Jim. I could do it off committee. I just left the committee because I didn't have the time
All right.
during the day.
Because I just, Del, I was thinking of you, because it's like right up your alley.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that at all. I made note of it. I'll work on something. If I need some information.
Yeah, give me a yell. Thanks.
Anything else? All right,
Yeah, one thing, Jim, to get a real bang for our buck, maybe we can think of one or two other things we might be able to, bring to their attention. I don't know,
All right. I just was, I was down on the
Yeah.
beach today looking at stuff.
It's a good idea. Yeah.
There's a lot of fencing down there.
It's a lot of, but you know what? There's a lot more places that can really use fencing that there isn't.
That looks fine,
Yeah, we could just emphasize how we're trying to make it easier because it's the most productive.
I have one other thing on education. Are you done?
That looks fine, it looks like the same form.
No, you can do that. But what I wanted to do
Okay.
is mention that I read today that Newsday acknowledged the town board passing no balloons intentionally let go, and it has a picture of Susan's balloons that she gathered and made a fish out of, and I want to publicly acknowledge Susan for all her hard work. And it wasn't mentioned in the article that I read, and thank you once again for
Thank you. Thank you
doing
for
that.
supporting the effort.
Absolutely, yeah. So,
This is embarrassment time, right?
no, not at all.
Next Mylar balloons.
Okay, and then what did you
Yeah,
have
but
here?
thank you, that's very nice of you, I appreciate that.
Yep.
And then, next, I see education comes again, so I've made an appointment for Ashley Oliver of the Montauk, the Shellfish Hatchery, and Brian and myself to go to Emma Gansett Elementary School in April, April 22nd, so we'll do another round there for the kids.
Great.
okay.
Yeah, that's it.
All right.
Thank you.
Old business, 33 Old Fireplace Road, debris on the beach.
Okay. I went down there, looked at this couple weeks ago, and, yep, it's a nice section of bulkhead.
Yeah.
It sits between two properties. Arlene did a really good job of hunting down contacts for the owners. We have been in communication with both of the owners of the properties. They are willing to let somebody cross their property. Ed Michaels did get a estimate from Mickey's Karting to remove it. That was $3,500. I think we can do it cheaper. I spoke to Stephen Lynch. Steve said if we can get it out to the road, he'd be happy to pick it up and dispose of it. I would like to ask the board to basically give me a budget of $1,500 to $2,000. I'll try and get it done for as cheap as I can.
Can I ask you what the
Cut this
debris
thing up.
actually is?
Yeah.
What it is
You
it's
got
a
a picture
whole
of it?
section
Oh.
of sheet pile.
It's like about
And
seven
whaler.
pilings, a 35-foot piece of like 8 by 8.
All revetment?
And
Yeah,
3-inch
yeah.
thick CCA
Oh, yes,
planking.
this was, you had
Yes.
pictures of them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
we
last
had
meeting.
pictures of it
Yes,
the last
okay,
meeting, and
absolutely.
it's not going anywhere, but as Chris pointed out in a conversation earlier today, it is a moon tide in a week or so. I'd love to be able to get it out of there before then. What it comes down to is basically having somebody with like a rubber track excavator sneak between these two houses, cut this thing up into manageable portions, bring it out to the road, load it on one of the town trucks, and let them take it away.
Sounds good.
I'll make a
And it's
motion.
also a
Yep.
dangerous thing, too.
You know, and this is a section of beach that,
Yeah, it is dangerous.
Yeah.
that, you know, Arlene did some research. The bulkheads that are adjacent to this thing, these are property owners that did contact us, did get trustee permits for their bulkheads years ago. I think it's a gesture of good faith on our part to deal with this thing.
All in favor?
Aye.
The budget of 2,000s,
Yeah, we'll go over that.
Okay.
up to 2,000. Yeah.
15 up to 2. That's what I wrote.
Oh, whatever is.
Whatever it
reasonable.
takes.
Yeah.
Not to exceed 2,000.
Right.
Okay, great. Committee reports, aquaculture, Napeag Harbor, New Oyster Garden site.
Okay, I think this is in everybody's folder. Yeah, there's resolution here with a picture of the proposed Oyster Garden site that Charlie spoke about last week. So hopefully this picture can be used to, in addition to locating this site, could be used to locate the moorings in this area to keep them sort of separate from the site and away from the site, and make the people who come in for mooring applications aware of the Oyster Garden site that'll be there if we approve this. So, do I need to read this whole resolution, Chris?
Test.
All right, resolution, public notice on proposed use of trustee bottomlands at Napeague Harbor for an oyster garden for individual private use. The following resolution was offered and adopted by unanimous vote of the town trustees. Whereas the trustees of the freeholders commonality of the town of East Hampton are the owners in fee title of the bottomland of Napeague Harbor. And whereas in addition to the trustees' inherent powers as owners of said bottomland, Section 213-18 of the East Hampton Town Code specifically authorizes the trustees to vary and regulate the limitations on taking of shellfish in town waters or bottomlands over which the trustees have jurisdiction, including Napeague Harbor. Whereas this activity elsewhere in town waters has been successful at producing marketable oysters, as well as oysters that have been made available for seeding to public grounds, thereby creating public benefit. And whereas there is in recent years an increased demand for this activity, therefore warranting the designation of additional areas for this activity, including an area within Napeague Harbor. And whereas the trustees wish to designate a new area of bottomlands within Napeague Harbor for the nurturing and harvesting of oysters by private individuals within assigned plots or areas under the supervision of the town aquaculture department. And whereas the trustees believe this practice should continue at said location for years to come, in the interest of trustee and public efficiency, the time period for this resolution not to exceed 4 years should be established. I'd just like to point out that that 4-year period would allow this oyster garden to end at the same time the other 3 oyster gardens end. They got 5 years. So all the renewals, if there are renewals, take place the same year. Now therefore be it resolved that public notice shall be given by publication on February 21st, 2019 in the East Hampton Star, trustees' official newspaper of record, that the trustees intend to designate a new area of bottomlands within Napeague Harbor, which will be designated as an oyster garden to be used for the nurturing and harvesting of oysters. Private individuals to whom plots or areas of bottomland will be exclusively assigned. Be it further resolved that the so-called Napeague Harbor Oyster Garden is proposed to encompass an area of bottomland approximately 50 feet by 100 feet in extent, the corners of which shall be located per the following table. North corner, 41 degrees, 12 minutes, 63 seconds north. Latitude, longitude 72 degrees, 3 minutes, 32.18 seconds west. West corner, 41, latitude 41 degrees, 12 minutes, 26 seconds north by longitude of 72 degrees, 3 minutes, 32.63 seconds west. The south corner, latitude of 41 degrees, 11 minutes, that's 0 minutes, 11.58 seconds north. A longitude of 72 degrees, 3 minutes, 31.67 seconds west. In the east corner, latitude of 41 degrees, 0 minutes, 11.91 seconds north. By longitude of 72 degrees, 3 minutes, 31.28 seconds west. And be it further resolved that the proposed Napeague Harbor Oyster Garden is intended to be divided into as many as 20 plots, each of which plots is to be exclusively leased or otherwise assigned to one or more individuals working in concert, and be it further resolved that pursuant to Section 213-18 of the East Hampton Town Code, as well as the trustees' inherent powers as owners of the bottom land in question, the area of the proposed oyster garden will be closed to the general public for purposes of the taking of shellfish in accordance with this resolution, and will be appropriately delineated and posted so as to indicate. And be it further resolved that the cooperation and involvement of the town aquaculture department is requested in delineating, posting, and managing the said Napeague Harbor Oyster Garden. And be it further resolved that a resolution establishing the aforementioned Napeague Harbor Oyster Garden shall take effect after adoption by the town trustees and following publications of the adopted resolution in the newspaper of record, filing of said resolution with the town clerk, and posting of said resolution on the official notice board in East Hampton Town Hall, whichever shall last occur. Be it further resolved that this resolution shall remain in effect for 4 years from the date of adoption without any further action required on behalf of the trustees during this term. Trustees may, but are not required, to revisit this resolution prior to the completion of the 4-year term to address any unanticipated changes in circumstances. Dated February 11th, 2019, by order of the trustees, freeholders and commonalty of the town of East Hampton, Francis J. Bach, clerk of the trustees.
Do I have a
Well done.
motion?
I'd make a motion to accept it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I would just like to add to this that this is completely different than the Suffolk County shellfish program, because there has been some confusion as to the trustee Napeague shellfish hatchery efforts and the Suffolk County.
Who seconded that motion? Jim, you made the motion? Who seconded
Rick.
it? Thank you, Rick.
Just a quick question. 4 years, what's the amount of time for the oyster seeds to mature? Isn't it more than a year? 3 years?
No, I mean, if they were grown this year, if they were started this year,
Mm-hmm.
a few would be ready next year, 2020, and the bulk would be 2021.
Okay.
So it's like some would take about a year, 18 months, and the bulk would take 24, 30 months.
Okay. Thank you. Good job. All right, Peconic Estuary Program? Anything to report?
Well, I think also in your folders, there's the final 2 sections that were discussed as part of the Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan. That would be on the climate change chapter and the public outreach chapter. So that's just for you to review. These are the points that'll go into the plan. There may be some changes between these lists and the final list, but not very many changes. And the program people are planning on making presentations to the local municipalities, town boards, and town trustees in the upcoming months, sort of to go over the larger points of the program and sort of try to tie it into how, the municipalities can interact with the program. So,
They float, right?
what?
The oyster racks?
In the
Are they
oyster-
color-coded so
This is-
people can see them?
We're on something else.
No, I know, I'm sorry.
Going back to the oysters?
Yeah, please.
There,
'Cause people were concerned like their boats would hit them.
These are in very shallow water.
yeah,
They're
these
close
are
to
right,
shore.
fairly close to shore.
Oh, good, okay.
In Napeague.
You know where the trailer?
Off
the
Crest-
trailers
Crescent
are?
Road.
It's down there.
No.
No.
this isn't close to
Oh,
it.
You can
okay.
walk out
There at the end of
500
Lazy
yards,
Point.
you see your ankles kind of wet, you know, it's
No, this is kind of
pretty
more or less
shallow, you know?
Any of them in
houses
deep water?
down there.
Yeah, in
Not
front of
here.
the camps,
I called,
camp houses.
I called Barley to ask him exactly where they were gonna be. It's on that public piece of land that East Hampton owns at the end.
Right at the end of the
They'll
road.
be right there.
There's a map in your,
Yeah, it's in here.
attached to that resolution, so.
I'd like to add, just, I forgot, I went to Dr. Gobler's presentation at Stony Brook University this past week, and it was very interesting. It was a two-hour program about climate change and how it affects the bivalves. So I got his slide presentation. If you'd like it, I can share it with you. It was very interesting.
I'd like to see it.
Okay, I'll send it to you. Anybody else? Because I don't want to...
Sure.
Okay. All right, I'll do an FYI.
All right, for some reason, we have education again for community outreach.
Oh, that's the M against School, April. I did mention that, so we can
Okay.
bypass that.
All right. All right. Just trying to find where this is. All right, Lazy Point leases, rules and regulations. Jim,
Okay.
you're on.
I don't know, I think most of you are aware that the last few months, Brian and I have been working with the members of the Lazy Point community at sort of recrafting the terms on the leases. You know, one of the things, you know, the Lazy Point leases run year to year, and they have been that way since the beginning. Now, over the years, those properties have sold for, you know, significant amounts of money. There's been complaints from members of this board that, geez, you know, it's become Millionaire's Row down there, which, yes, it has. And it has for the simple fact that because these are year-to-year leases, and there is a market for these properties, and even if a homeowner would like to keep that property in the family, if they don't have the means to fix that residence up, there's no avenue to borrow against that property. If they don't have other properties that they could leverage to borrow, they're stuck. And with things like sea level rise, properties, as soon as you exceed 50% of the value of the building, the structure, you're locked into FEMA compliance, all right? And it's just a matter of time where we're going to have to address these issues. So the discussion worked around to extending these leases out to about 35 years. The escalators that are in those leases now would continue, but what it would allow the property owner, the homeowners down there the ability to do would be to get financing on these things. I think it would simplify some of our paperwork in-house. It would ensure a revenue stream from the Lazy Point for the community for years to come. And I think it would satisfy some property owners' intentions of trying to keep properties in their families. I'd like to open this up for discussion from the board, see what everybody thinks about it. Chris, did you? What's that?
I'm hearing from home.
I'm sorry.
No, everyone, the whole meeting, so.
Oh, okay.
So we will now go to sign language.
Yeah. Brian, that's going to be your job.
Yeah.
I fully support what Jim is saying, and I think it's an incentive for people to feel, number one, they're feeling more stable, they can improve their property, they have a sense that they have a home instead of just a year-to-year lease. And I think it encourages people to go out and get a mortgage to improve their property with either hurricane windows or new roofs. And I think it's a very positive thing in the right direction for the people who live in Lazy Point now, in addition to the trustees owning the property underneath.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing all the way around, and it's the right thing to do.
There's one other point, is that the way it is right now, the leases are automatically renewed. So we're not giving people a 35, so they have a 35-year lease now. They have an infinite lease because we've never we've never failed to renew a lease. So basically, people that are there now have a lease in perpetuity.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they don't.
No, I
But
mean,
Bill, they don't. And this is the problem, is you can take that alleged lease in perpetuity and bring it to any lending institution, and they would tell you that, I'm sorry,
No,
on a
I
year-to-year.
They don't have a real legal
Completely.
instrument
Yeah.
in terms of a lease that's
Yeah. I think,
documented.
you know, Chris researched this with considerable degree. Brian had brought, what is it, the town of Babylon?
Yeah.
It's in exactly the same situation, and they went over to this system many years ago. We had conversations with their council and some of their members, and they said it's worked fine. I don't personally see any real downsides to
I
this.
don't either.
We are not depriving the public of any sort of access to this land that has not been in place before. And I think what it would do is it would maintain, the continuity of this area.
Hey, Jim,
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that it also opens up these properties to local people, where if
Well,
someone wanted to buy it and not have this cash at hand, and they could get a mortgage and
Well-
become a new member of the community?
Yes, I think it would if there's a homeowner down there that's willing to sell under those circumstances. But when I was a kid, Lazy Point was the place that if you basically didn't have two nickels to rub together and you were trying to get something, if you could scam 25 or 30 grand together, you could buy one of those houses. Well, that's not the case today. The waterfront properties are trading in excess of $1 million, and they're cash sales. And the difficulty I see with some of these properties is if, let's say you have one of these elderly homeowners stand there that may have a family member or something that they would like to see this property ceded to. Well, it's a nice thought, but if that family member doesn't have the means to fix the house up or to maintain the house, well, that property winds up like so many of these properties. It's sold, and it's sold at a fairly good amount of money. So the best intentions, people just
And it's
couldn't
knocked
see.
down, and another house comes in that
No, they're not knocked down, Susan. We're not
Well-
knocking any houses down there, and we're not expanding any houses down there. That hasn't occurred, and under this new lease system, it still won't occur. We've been disciplined, not me, but the trustee board's been pretty disciplined over the years to maintain the character of this area. And this lease, this proposed 35-year lease, is not meant to change that one iota, okay? There is no language in here that says, well, now that you have a 35-year lease, you can double the size of your house. If you look at the lot areas that are leased.
Oh, no, I wasn't referring to the current people. In real estate, as you know, throughout the East End, houses are bought and taken down, and then
Okay.
something replaces them.
That
I'm not referring to the current
Okay.
owners.
Couldn't happen without.
Yes, I understand that.
Owner owns
But
that.
I understand that. But if that land
restrictions
accommodates a
on it.
certain zoning, that's all I was referring to. If
Yeah,
the
well, the way-
property would permit a larger,
There's
House.
nothing down
No.
there that's gonna.
No, it doesn't.
The one thing I would anticipate is if they start getting mortgages down there, are the banks going to require them to come into FEMA compliance? In which case, we're going to have to start realizing that we have to consider
Well,
that houses are going to be raised on piling.
Okay, couple things that are inevitable. Yes, the answer is, are the banks going to ask for it? Not necessarily, but what is going to happen is when we just had it a year ago. We had a new homeowner came to us, we approved them doing renovations on the house. They went to the town to get a building permit. The town said, well, you've exceeded the value of this house by more than 50%. You're more than 50% of the value of the house. You are mandated to be FEMA compliant at this point. The homeowner backed away from the scope of their renovations, but it's a matter of time. And the reality here is we want to get better septic systems, things like that. These things are not cheap, and we've got to give the property owners an incentive and an ability to do that.
I
But
completely
thought that
agree
this
with you.
35-year lease thing, I thought would allow that.
I also think, though, that we have to consider the possibility that there will be a lot of development there that could come along with this, where people now have the means to acquire the finances to do the renovations necessary, and then there may be these stipulations that come along with it.
Well, really, those lots are so small.
They are. They're very constrained, and the board has only issued, I don't know.
But it seems to
George,
me,
how many additions have gone on down there in your lifetime? Additions have gone on down there in your lifetime.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
there are some that have even been denied.
A lot of them have been
A lot
denied.
have been
Yeah.
denied by the trustees.
Any renovations to the houses come before the Board of Trustees.
Right.
Yeah.
We,
As well as the town.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter what the town wants to get them, the trustees can always say no.
The trustees have the final say.
Okay.
but a lot of those older houses there, it seems to me, if they have the means now to renovate, and they're gonna have to meet FEMA and go up on pilings, you're gonna get tear downs and rebuilds. They may be rebuilds to the same footprint, but it's gonna be a significantly different house.
But you know, John, I'm
But
looking,
the footprint isn't gonna be.
the footprint's gonna stay the same, and I'm looking at the opportunity to put in a low nitrogen septic system
I
as part of
understand
that. So there is a good thing coming out of this, but I don't see, I know we had a discussion on the phone where I thought that you were thinking that these houses were gonna be expanded and, you know, we were gonna go through a similar situation that you get on other properties.
Well, I'm not sure that some of them couldn't be expanded, maybe minimally, but
Well,
nevertheless.
that would be on a case-by-case basis.
Sure.
There's no language in this lease that changes.
They still have to abide by zoning codes.
well, they have to.
Well, not only the
Trustee rules and
trustees, right.
regulations.
Yeah,
But a house that's a single-story house, we have pyramid laws. So how many houses, I guess case by case, if you have a single-story house, what is the typical ruling of going up on the
Let
same
me ask
footprint?
this question.
Because of pyramid law. Sorry?
On a 50-foot lot.
How does raising the house to meet FEMA compliance jive with the pyramid law? Let's say you just took an existing house, put it on pilings,
well, it's
and you're
gonna,
right next to the property line. Doesn't that
It's-
automatically sort of?
There'll be a lot of curtains being
Yeah.
sold.
well, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the situation that you have, that you already have. That's one of the reasons for this, is that if, let's say, you're an adjacent neighbor, somebody next door to you makes their property FEMA compliant, and as a matter of just being consistent, you desire to do the same thing. Well, if you don't have the money in your pocket, you can wish and want all you can. You don't really, you may not have the means to do that. And we'd like to give the property owners down there, the homeowners, the means to do that.
It's preserving the area, as opposed to letting houses go into dilapidation or become roofings, the house itself becomes weakened if you can't improve. So I'm in favor
Yeah,
of
roofing,
allowing
you don't
people
need a
to.
permit.
Excuse me?
You don't need a building permit to replace your roof.
No, but I'm saying what you're proposing
Yeah, you need the
permits
means.
people to get a mortgage to improve their home, where otherwise they could end up with broken windows if they only have single pane. They would like to improve the properties, and then therefore the trustees benefit because the properties are improved, they're in better shape, and if they are FEMA compliant, that's better for the families that are there. It's a way of protecting the residents who live there. I'm in favor of it.
You know, the other thing too, the town has the Architectural Review Board. I suspect the trustees would kind of play that role as well when it came to looking at a proposed, renovation so it stays in step with the character down there. So,
But you can, actually, in October of 1983, the trustees ruled that the Ferraris could not expand their home by 1,000 square feet because this addition would adversely affect the neighbors.
We've,
The trustees have every right
just in the
and
past
say
several years,
in that.
we've held meetings, we discussed roof lines on houses.
I don't think it's.
I
gonna
seem
be
to
that
remember-
kinda out of control.
I seem to remember years ago, the discussions of possibly moving, if houses were going to be significantly renovated, and this may give more people that ability, of swapping out waterfront lots for more landward lots.
That wasn't the reason that discussion occurred. That discussion occurred on a few select properties that were in jeopardy of being lost. And as an incentive to those owners, that was spoken about. I don't know whether it was ever actually offered up.
It was offered up to
It
like
was-
Susan Noble.
Was it?
Susan
Was
Noble,
it?
I think
Okay.
it was, yeah.
She's had quite a bit of
But
difficulty
that was the
down on-
purpose. It had nothing to do with expansion, John. That was a matter of trying to keep a lessee on land that may not necessarily been the property that historically they had been leasing.
and the other thing too is, we no longer, and this is not identical to what you said, but we no longer allow homes to be built down there on lots. That's done. So, which is not to say in an emergency where somebody's home is threatened, that we wouldn't be able to accommodate. I think we would, but typically speaking, there's no more homes being built down there on those southerly lots.
Well, if there were a lot, a waterfront lot that was close to the water and in some people's judgment threatened by sea level rise and shoreline erosion, and they wanted to do a renovation and they could meet FEMA compliance, which would protect their house to a certain degree, would the trustees have the ability to make a judgment that they felt that that house should be moved to a more landward lot? Or would we sort of be tied into making a decision whether that, we wanted that house to be renovated in that location,
But
close to the water?
John, that decision is made irregardless of the term of the lease.
Yeah, like Jim said,
Right.
it'll be a case-by-case basis.
Right.
And
The future
whatever
will
the board of trustees are sitting there at that time, it would be.
And we can't encumber a future board.
Water and erosion.
There might be other agencies involved in this.
Well, I'm sure there would.
Yeah, but that doesn't, there's no like real interaction between the term of the lease and what you just described. That same discussion would occur on a year-to-year lease.
Chris, is this something that should go to public hearing?
Well, we looked at a couple layers. We looked at, one was the public trust doctrine, and whether or not that would apply. In this context, it's not property that was historically or traditionally used for public purposes, i.e. a park, things like that. So because it's used privately and leased out to these tenants as residential properties, I'm not sure that's something that needs to go out to the public in that nature.
Okay.
Another layer to this, you guys, is the rules and regulations. So as you remember, a few months ago, it was chicken coops and dumpsters. So you always maintain that level of control over the rules and regulations as well, regardless of the 35-year lease term. You still have that right to amend these rules and regulations over the years as well.
Yeah, 'cause
Something to keep
back
in
in the
mind.
80s too, there was
Right.
an application denied to put a mobile home on one of the lots.
Well, we just had that
Yeah, we
surface
So that was the
again
RV,
recently.
yeah, the RV, yeah. So the, and the trustees denied it.
My opinion, I support this. I don't know whether we feel comfortable putting a motion forth tonight to vote on this, or whether we'd like to hold this over.
Has
to another
everybody seen a
meeting.
copy of this lease?
I don't think so. So just to give a little more background on the lease as well.
Circulate it to everybody to just read through it.
Yeah,
Correct.
absolutely. And what we have right now is sort of a crude draft lease. It's definitely not a final product right now. What we did was, when Brian and Jim and I started discussing this topic, I took a look at there's a lease, there's an environmental certificate, and there's the rules and regulations. And it's sort of become a bit haphazard over the years in the way it's put together. So it is also an opportunity to kind of reconstruct this thing, make it user-friendly, make everybody able to understand it, be able to read through it in a smooth way. So what we did was we put it together so that you have your lease, and then you have your rules and regulations, and they're just kind of two documents side by side. So I think it's a little smoother. I have copies here now. Again, it's definitely not a final version by any means, but I have enough copies for those that might not have seen it to be able to start to take a look at it.
Be
I
great
would
to-
welcome a lot of feedback on this. This is a work in progress, so I think we can all kind of work together and come up with something that everybody's happy with.
So can we,
I got a copy of that from Chris, and I looked through it, and there was a lot of stuff that I'd like to go over somebody with, preferably Chris, I guess.
Sure.
I feel I need some time to better understand this and
Yeah, this is,
what a lot of these points in these documents, what kind of ramifications they may have.
okay.
Can we all get a copy then?
oh, yeah.
Of course, I have
Read it.
I have
So-
5 or 6 right now.
Okay,
All right.
that would be
Those
great.
that don't have.
So I guess in the meantime, we'll table it,
Table it. Well, it's a good,
come back
this is a big issue. We should discuss it thoroughly. We've been through this quite a
for a
bit.
long time.
So,
See, the last point I'll make out, and I had inquired about this, even though it's a long-term lease now, or will be, hopefully, if the tenant is not in good standing and they break the lease, it's no different than having a one-year lease. Whether it's 3501, they still have to be in good standing. And I think that was worth throwing out.
They do need to be in good standing, and a lot of these terms, when it comes to the mortgage aspect of it, what it does is it typically allows the lender the opportunity to get in there and cure whatever that breach of lease would be. If it's, say, put a fence up we didn't allow, you're not going to be able to just terminate a lease because the fence was in the wrong place. Typically what it does is it allows this lender a 30-day cure period or things like that, so that, because they're going to be lending on this thing potentially for 30 years.
That makes sense, sure. Good.
I'd just like to throw this out as a question, and I, understand Chris doesn't feel as though it's necessary to send this to a public hearing. What's the board's feeling on whether they feel we should or not allow the public to weigh in on this, considering it's a major change to trustee holdings?
Well, I'm sure we would notice it, and, we could establish a grace period for comment. And, we're announcing it now that it's being discussed, so we are getting some public announcement of it. But we could put it in the Star and do some things like that. I think when we've had changes to the rules and regs before, they were noticed in the paper of record.
Yeah, and I don't think, no matter what happens, it shouldn't be done until this document is finalized.
Absolutely.
So let's just keep the
so this is
discussion
basically
going.
opening it up for discussion with the world.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the answer is yes. People can submit comment from this point going on forward, and we welcome it. And
So what would be the procedure? I mean, once this lease is in a final form, does it get published before we vote on it?
Well, it would be publicly noticed, is how it's been done before. When there were changes to the rules and regs, it was put into the paper that there are changes made, and people are encouraged to comment or come to the meeting to discuss.
they would be welcome to come to the pulpit and share with us, but I don't think we're going to have.
But are the terms of the lease published, or?
We can publish that, there's no reason why we wouldn't.
Could be in the legal notices section of the paper, I suppose.
Yeah, it's public record.
I was just going to say, it's public record, it's accessed,
Yeah.
and would it be on our website as well?
It could be.
For people to access and read it there?
Yeah,
I think
I'll
it's certainly
answer.
worthy of a public meeting. I
Sure.
think John is right on that, so that the public full disclosure as to what the new rules and regulations are is important. And have people come in and, who are from from Lazy Point to
Well, I would expect that our next
speak, or
meeting, we will be
public in
seeing
general.
the Lazy Point community.
Yeah, good. Yeah,
I have a feeling this is gonna generate some interest.
You know.
yeah, that's fine.
Anything else?
Thanks, Jim.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Mark?
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
Roads Committee?
Yeah.
Anything?
Yes, we're continuing to discuss the potential for getting some of the trustee roads surveyed. Susan was kind enough to get a quotation from a local surveyor for one of the roads, Six Pole Highway.
Just so we can get, the board can get an idea of the cost. You know, we certainly battled around some other roads that we might want done first, Midland.
Midland Highway came to mind. There are some unauthorized improvements on that road that it would be helpful to have a clear delineation of the trustee property there. So we haven't come to a final conclusion, but Susan, is it okay if we share this
Yeah,
number?
I forwarded this to you, right? Did you get it? Yeah.
So-
So, yeah, I mean, we can certainly get prices, quotes from other surveyors if the board so chooses, but just to give us an idea, to do Six Pole Highway from Merchants Path to the northwest end, it would be $5,500.
Approximately,
put
what's the
in-
length of that?
Maybe it's a quarter mile.
Yeah,
not the
That's
longest of
just
our
to put in
roads.
those metal stakes. If we want the concrete monuments, it's an additional $150 or $175
Per?
per
Per monument.
monument.
How long did you say the road was?
Quarter mile.
Quarter
Yeah,
mile?
probably like quarter of a mile.
Where do the
Okay.
monuments go? At the corner
At
of
the
every
corner.
adjoining property? Of every
No,
abutting
no,
property?
no, you
Just
don't.
the corners
No,
of the-
just the corners of the road, because
They
if you
become
do every
owners,
abutting
permanent.
property, it's gonna be way more than $5,500
They use
bucks.
stakes for much of the
And
delineations.
Walbridge was, said that, I don't think he was charging us a deposit.
Is that the 5,500 is Walbridge, George Walbridge? And what about Saskis?
Well, we probably should get a couple
We
of
can get, we
prices.
can get a couple of quotes, but this was just to give us an idea,
Right.
just to start off looking at what it would.
So would
cost
it
us.
be, Suzie, would it be the ones that we are having some pushback maybe from folks that are, kind of getting close to our property, except?
Well, I think that's the ones, yeah, that we've come across so far that we'd like to get started with.
You've
Right,
identified.
but I mean, we wouldn't necessarily do it to all trustee roads, because,
Eventually, I would like to see
Okay.
them all done. I mean, it's not gonna happen in a short time span.
sure,
but
all right,
Eventually, I would like to see other boards continue this work and,
yeah, I would too, and if you spread it out,
and
it's not too much of a
No,
hit.
it's a good idea
Yeah, a couple few
to
a
have
year.
them done.
Okay,
Would you get a better price from a surveyor if you sort of threw 10 projects at them? Give us
Well,
a
do you
price
wanna
for 10
spend,
projects?
do you wanna spend 40 as opposed to $50,000 this year on road surveys? I don't think we have the $40,000, even if the guy says yes
I
to
think we
it.
kind of have to chip
So-
away at this. Unless somebody wants to give us a big donation, or.
Well, I
Right.
think this is good, this is a good idea.
It is,
You know what,
yeah.
what it would do is it would give the boards, future boards, a real document that they could go out in the field with
Right.
and compare to the conditions in the field. Right now, when these guys have got to go out and look at a trustee road, they're very much dependent on tax maps, which are not the best things to work from, and the offending property owner survey, which if their survey for some reason is in error, which sometimes they are, which may have been the cause of the
Often.
impingement, how do you're gonna need to have a document that backs us up. And I think, when I first heard this, I said, geez, this is Pandora's box. But the more I thought about it, the more of a benefit for this future boards, I think.
It takes away the ambiguity of what the
It
trustees
definitely
own.
does.
it becomes fact as opposed to conjecture. So I think it's a very
Yeah.
positive move.
Now, this is the road that has the gate on it?
Yes,
Yeah.
this is where
So this is like
207 6 pole.
this is like the prime one we should go after,
That
'cause-
was formerly the Wolf property that, yeah. it's-
yeah.
And then you have the cemetery back in the back there.
And that may be a research project in addition to.
To really see
project.
historically how far that road went through, which we're still trying to uncover.
Well, we knew this was going to be an expensive endeavor,
Yeah,
but it's important that we have,
Well, this is a good property, this is
figure
a,
out our,
for what we have left.
So maybe
know?
before the next meeting,
memorialize it.
Sure.
I'll ask for a quote on Midland from Walbridge and
Maybe
Saskis.
Saskis, I would get a third.
Third.
you want, we want to stick like within the town's,
services, but
No, I understand that, but can I tell you what, just to get a
Policy.
feel, because you know what, you will find that some of these guys are a little bit different, in prices.
Absolutely.
In all honesty, for the company that does this, that gets established as sort of the surveyor of record, this is one of those things, I wouldn't give them a set time frame. Say, hey, if you've got a couple light days or something that you're trying to fill your schedule, there might be an incentive on their end to give us a little better price, knowing that this
There are
is gonna
others
be
coming.
somewhat of an annuity.
Yeah,
You're
we want
gonna
it
be
in the
doing,
next
you're gonna be
year.
doing
We
one or
don't
two
need
of
it
these a
by
year.
No,
Tuesday.
right, exactly.
Okay, yeah, I'll speak to them about that, and I'll speak to Saskis and.
Is it something that's worth sort of,
is
so
this
to
worth,
speak, going out to bid for? So you
like a
just
request
throw
for
it out there
proposals,
to
maybe?
Several, or is it?
You can. My only concern, I'm gonna be honest with you, my only concern with that
Yeah.
is you can get a price
RFP.
that'll cut that number in half if you wanna go out of town. My only concerns with that is you get a document
At least.
from a firm that may not even be in business next year. I personally would feel more comfortable using established local firms that can hold on to that information and have it be available to us.
Yeah, I think we should do that at least with these first couple. And if we're gonna expand the program, we have to look into, the costs.
Yeah, I feel good about it, it's good.
Yeah, so you can get,
Realize that it's gonna be an ongoing thing, that,
yeah, but you can get prices for the next meeting?
yes, I'll get some more, I'll get some prices on Midland, and, I don't know, is there any other one, Al, that you can think of that you might wanna?
Jason's path
As
is
we're-
interesting, and we do have the
Yeah.
treatment center there. That's been a little bit of a rub point. And that's a really beautiful road, and a lot of people do mountain bike back over to Bull Path, and that's just another one that we have looked at, and there's been a
And we
little
had
bit of
those
history.
properties where Jason's Path comes through to Bull Path.
Yep.
And we had that cluster of, the subdivision where we had issues with the easements, no questionable.
We'll close.
But Midland and Six Pole are pretty straightforward,
Okay,
for starters.
yeah.
They're kind of nice straight shots.
all right. 3 Mile Harbor, that mooring at 39 Sammy's Beach.
I had an opportunity to speak to the applicant since the last meeting and shared with him a little bit of background that, it's one of the few areas in Trustee Waters that's really been setting up with bay scallops over the year, and we're, looking ahead to this year to maybe try to figure out what the best management practices are for that area, and are moorings there and moorings for bigger boats appropriate in that area, and asked if he would consider applying for a permit this year on the bay side of his property, since he has a beautiful sandy beach in front of his house. And he was very, very nice, and was very open to taking this year to give us a little time to maybe confer a little more with Barley and see, if Cornell has any interest in maybe doing some more restoration work over there. As they did do the probe studies in 3 Mile a couple of years ago, and Susan mentioned she had spoken to Kim, or was speaking to Kim about coming in with an update.
I was going to say that next, after you're done, yep.
So I think there's an opportunity to, have a little bit of time this year before having to weigh in on the larger boat outside of the large boat field. And do we want to have more moorings just south of Sammy's Beach in an area that has been pretty productive, with respect to bay scallops as well. So he is pursuing the town permit outside, and, hopefully
Good,
we
that
can
was a
sup-
nice,
we can
smooth-
support his efforts. If for some reason he has trouble on that side, maybe we can explain why we've asked him to go there with the town clerk's office.
So he was amenable, and that's nice.
Yep, so it's a good starting point. He had some questions about launching kayaks and paddle boards, and he does have a little path down to the harbor side. And I think he's gonna focus on paddle sports on the harbor and boating on the bay.
Would we consider possibly offering like an emergency mooring in case there's a storm?
Well, he has a boat
For him?
slip.
Oh, he
has a boat
does?
slip.
Okay.
Yeah, he has a
All right,
boat slip.
never
This is
mind.
more for weekend use.
Okay.
Did you make it clear to him the risks inherent in mooring in the bay if something comes up?
For this, well, it's a weekend-only slip, and like I've had a mooring off Lazy Point for a number of years, and, it is all hands on deck when, a nor'easter comes through or something and the mooring field clears out. But because his slip is also in 3 Mile, it's a pretty handy spot, to just slip back in the harbor. So I don't think it's a real burden on.
Yeah, just
him.
if we're recommending him to try this out for the year, I just didn't want to, I think we should just reiterate the fact that it
No,
is
I
the
spoke-
bay, it's not the
I spoke
harbor.
to him about it. The good news is, it is predominantly a south-southwesterly flow. In the
Right.
summer, you have Cedar Bluffs to the southwest.
Right. But things can come
It
up.
can be a great anchorage. It's beautiful sandy beach, there's no structure out front. So, I think it's a really fair recommendation for a season and for weekend use. So he never really has to leave the boat unattended, during the week or anything like that. It can go back to the slip.
Okay.
But thank you for bringing that up.
And just to add, again, Kim Barber, I did call about her eelgrass, and she's been doing her research, and she's been very busy, but she said in March, and she's looking at the end of March to come and visit with us and report about how the eelgrass project is doing, so.
Great. Good. And then, something related to that, we do need to have Dr. Gobler come in and give us his annual report, so.
I asked him to come when I saw him at the seminar, and I said, come in and maybe give the presentation that he did.
Well, he does an
just
annual
to-
report.
Yes, I know, but I also asked him if he would come in with that, so, do you want, are you going to reach out to him?
If you've been
Or-
talking to him, by all means,
Okay.
invite him in to give us, the annual water quality report. That's really, the program that we support, so I think that's the appropriate report to give. And if he has an adjunct report,
Okay,
I guess
I will
that's okay,
get in
too.
touch with him this week.
Okay.
Anything else on 3 Mile? All right, we'll move on to administrative, payment of the bills. Seacoast Enterprise Associates, $37.02. Optimum, $167.80. Ready Fresh, $60.27. Matthews, Kirst, and Cooley, $525 for Zweig. East Hampton Star, $15.58. Do I have a motion to pay the
I'll
bills?
make a motion to pay the
I'll
bills.
second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and we have minutes from January 28th. Has anybody had a chance to review those?
I did, and I made, I think, 3 small, almost non-important corrections, and I gave that to Arlene
I
today.
did not get a chance to read them.
Yeah, I
because
didn't either.
It was sitting in that windmill thing, and I couldn't open it.
Yeah, I have
and
to
Yeah, you have trouble with those, too?
can't-
I do, too.
Okay, good.
Terrible.
Yeah, they have to come out as
Yeah.
I have to have a
PDF.
PDF file.
Why don't we just hold it over then till our next meeting?
Thanks, I thought it was just me.
Yeah,
We could see Susan's,
Yeah, no,
we
none of us
could
can
look
open
at
it.
Susan's corrections, and this will allow the trustees who haven't had a chance to look at it, to look at it.
Bill Taylor might have a solution to the
well, no,
windmill,
I
'cause
haven't,
It's been very time-consuming in the office trying to convert on my phone and then
there is an
email
app
them.
for the thing, but it works about half the time.
Yeah, it's win.data.
Yeah.
Dot
Yeah, that's,
something.
Yeah, well, it's you get to write it 6 times, it's gonna work once.
all right, we'll deal with that.
If we could find a way to send it better, it would make a,
When you send it, Arlene, does it come in does it say PDF file is being
Yes,
sent?
it is a PDF when I send it right from the scanner. It's a PDF, a red PDF,
Wow, that is interesting.
right from our scanner. It never was.
So how does it end up being in that windmill?
Either when it leaves the town server,
Yeah.
they may have some sort of block on it. I mean, I don't. You get it, Francis? You used to get the.
We'll call Heath.
Yeah, we'll call them, but if you have your East Hampton town email, you'll be able to open it. Yeah.
All right, financial report for, what?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, I was,
For the months ended December 31st and January 31st.
So I had an opportunity to look through it. It appears to be in order without objection. This would be to accept the January 2018 through December January 18th, that we accept the financial report.
Anybody have anything to add?
So Brian, is that the December year end or is that the January month end?
It's the entire year of 2018, correct, Arlene?
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
so I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, January 31st. Anyone have a chance to review those?
No, not yet.
No? Okay, we'll table that one.
And can I just bring up one thing?
Sure.
For records? Is it possible, I've had a lot of people asking why our agendas are not on the website
They should
for the
be.
public?
Yeah, Lori's been out sick a lot, and I've been holding down the fort as one person with a certain number of hours and a lot of jobs, so I'll get them on. I'm sorry about that, Susan. Thank you.
I'll confirm they're on by
I'll get them on, yeah.
Friday, the latest. All right.
Francis?
Yes.
Just want to bring this up as in correspondence. I know a letter was brought to the attention of the trustees. A resident, Allison Lupo, asked that the letter be read. I know that it hasn't been read. This letter was given to us in December. Didn't really know much about it until this morning when I was asked to make sure that the letter was read tonight. I see it's not on the agenda. I think it's just fair to maybe let this person know why nobody wants to read this letter. And at the same time, I would like to know what the protocol is on correspondence. I thought that if somebody wrote a letter and asked it to be read at a trustee meeting, and I could be wrong, I just was under the impression that that letter was to be read.
I'll take full responsibility for it, okay?
Okay.
I don't think that this letter has anything to do with trustee business. I think this is a personal matter between individuals.
Well, she felt...
And we should not be dragged into it.
Francis, she feels it isn't because it was addressed, her family was mentioned on live television during a trustee meeting. She feels that her letter should be read by the trustees, and that will make her feel better.
I disagree. And if the board wants to,
I was completely unaware that there was even a letter.
I don't think that, look.
There is, and look, Francis, this is not a threat for me or anything, but
I
this
understand.
family is very upset, and if they don't get the letter read, which should have been done before, it's such a simple thing to read a letter. Now, if you feel that it's not our business and you don't want to read the letter, you should open this up for the others to discuss, because this person is going to reach out to the media.
That's fine.
And that's fine, and I know it's fine with you, but it might not be fine with the rest of the board. It might not be fine with the person who on this board who's involved in this letter. Maybe it is, I don't know. And I'm not sure it's going to fly too well in the community or other. And look, I'm just bringing this out because this is the family is a close, they're almost like a second family to me.
They're a second family to a lot of people, and I agree with you.
Okay, they just have opened, they've come to me as a last effort.
I understand.
Okay, and if nothing is done, I'm just telling you, they are going to reach out to the media, the television, everything, because they feel that it was done at a trustee meeting in public. Her family was mentioned in a way that they perceived was not done in good taste. So they have asked the trustees simply to solve this issue by reading a simple letter that this person who feels slighted wants to get her opinion said. Now, I haven't read the letter. I don't know if it's an angry letter or a nice letter or just a letter asking for a simple apology. I swear to you, I don't know. But I felt that on a correspondence level with the trustees, any letter that the public gives to the trustees and does have some connection with the trustees should be read in a public forum if the trustees are asked to. That's all I want to say on it. Thank you.
Okay. This letter was precipitated by a comment that a board member made about their relationship with that family. And I think it was just something that was blurted out. People say things accidentally. We have all done that. And I personally don't feel that we should be dragged into a disagreement between two people on a personal matter. And if she wants to prolong this issue and make it a public issue, I'm completely against it here. If she wants to publish it in the East Hampton Star or anywhere else, that's her prerogative. But I will not read the letter. And if the board wants it read, then that's up to them.
May I ask a question, Francis? What is there a trustee policy or historical protocol for communication that comes into the office? It goes to the clerk's attention. Is it typically distributed to the board, or is it at the clerk's discretion to distribute it to the other board members? I'm not picking on this one issue, but I'm just trying to understand going forward, how should it be done, or is there a protocol already in place that we should be revisiting and discussing?
I don't know if there's a protocol for that. Again, I've never been in this situation in all the years I've been here. This is a personal.
Comes into the trustee office is a letter directed towards the trustees, not necessarily to be disseminated to the public through the trustees.
I believe, and again, I could be wrong, the letter states, and I could be wrong, I have not read the letter, I promise you, that I believe it says that the letter was to be read at the meeting. And that's solely because the comment was made in public at a trustee meeting, that she felt she would feel better if her letter in response was also read at a trustee meeting in public. That was her only wish. And of course now, this is going back to December. So, now that it's not getting read, I don't know at what point or what level they're going to take this. I just felt it was worth mentioning because I too feel that if a letter, whether it's good or bad, I mean, if it's a letter from the public who we represent wants to say something, that we should, in correspondence, do so. We've done it all the other times. Some other correspondence letters haven't been all that favorable towards us, but we still read it.
But this has nothing to do with the favorable or unfavorable trustee issue.
It was read. The comment was made during a trustee meeting, and it was made during a discussion about a trustee committee. So it was mentioned, has been made public through the trustees, and I think they are responsible. That's just my feeling. Again, Francis, you've said your feelings, I've said mine. That's all.
And that's what we're supposed to do,
Yes,
and that's fine.
Thanks.
And it's up to the board.
Oh, in the absence of actually seeing a letter,
So nobody got the letter?
I can't make a comment.
The letter wasn't distributed.
Okay.
Again, I take full responsibility for this. I have no desire to see the board dragged into a personal issue like that.
But you feel it's personal? Has anybody,
Absolutely.
but nobody else has seen the letter, so how could they make their own decision on that? It seems like you've taken something.
Should we get the
I
attorney?
did.
Making correspondence,
I
and you're
did.
taking responsibility for it, I understand, I thank you for that. But what you've done is you've taken a correspondence and you've taken it upon yourself to say, I'm not going to share this with the rest of the committee. And that I don't feel is proper.
Well, I didn't, actually, to be honest with you, they didn't ask me to share it with the rest of the committee. They asked me to read it
In public.
in public, and that is what I've decided not to do.
Okay.
But it's up to the rest of you guys.
Well, we'd have to all
So-
see the
Well,
letter.
that's fine. I have no problem with it getting
Can we
distributed.
see it? Because I haven't seen it, I'd like to see it.
Sure.
Does anybody
Well-
else want to see it, or no?
Should we have the trustee attorney review it?
I'm happy to review it.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to pass judgment on whether or not
No, you would have to obviously read it
read,
first.
but
So the second part of my question, the answer is no. Not all correspondences must be read at a trustee meeting. If somebody writes a letter to the trustees and says, I would like this letter to be read at a trustee meeting, you, Francis, will solely decide whether or not.
Not at all. Not at
Okay.
all. If it's trustee issues,
Okay.
I have, absolutely.
But you
I have
decide-
written,
but you decide whether it's trustee issue or not? Is that,
this is absolutely not a trustee issue.
well, I disagree.
Okay.
And
Well-
we have to leave it up to the board to decide that. So are you going to let us decide these things, or are you going to make the decisions on your own? That's all I'm asking.
This one letter is something I made a decision
So
on
this
my own.
one letter is going to be singled out from all the other issues?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So there's obviously, something that set this situation apart from everything else.
Yes, and I told you, this is a personal issue between two families. And
So
this
why
is
was
not
it brought up?
something that...
So why was it brought up at a trustee meeting?
Because the other party made a mistake and blurted something out.
And that person
As a-
doesn't wish to correct it for not only the rest of the Board of Trustees, but just to make things better. After all, that's all the person's asking.
That's,
is
it's
to have
not
their
my
letter read.
business. It's not my business. It's not your business. It's not anybody's business.
Well, it's my
here.
business because now the resident has asked me. So now it is my business.
Okay, fine.
What
So,
if this resident came to our meeting and
Yeah.
spoke publicly?
yeah, what's stopping her from doing
I
that?
don't know. I don't know.
Anybody can speak at the podium, and they have chosen not to.
And that's fine, but I also believe that folks, particularly this person, may have been under the impression that if they sent a letter to the trustees saying, please read this at a trustee meeting, that they would have it read. So,
Well,
And I
they
believe they
were
may be out of
mistaken.
town for the
Well,
winter.
did we respond to the letter?
No.
Well,
we spoke with them.
We did not respond in writing.
We did
I think
discuss,
it would have been
yes.
appropriate
Yes.
to respond to any correspondence, whether we think it's
well,
personal.
rather than just
And what
completely
was the
ignore it.
response?
I mean,
Just that you would receive the letter?
I acknowledge, look, I don't want to get in the middle of this. Whatever comes through the office, whatever, everything comes through
sounds
me.
awful
Okay,
fishy to
everything
me.
comes through me.
what's going on with this letter?
It's
Yeah,
not,
Why not just
no.
read the letter?
Read the letter.
I don't have the letter,
Wait,
and
well,
you didn't
let's-
send it to me.
Let's just resolve it.
How about
then.
if everyone receives the letter, and the person who wrote the letter, perhaps if she's watching, or we
Yes, she's
extend an invitation to ask her to come in and speak before the board, and it's a trustee meeting, it's aired on LTV, but I think that at the present time, we really are going around in a circle because nobody has the letter. So
So you're
let's
suggesting
read
that the person
letter.
should come in
So
rather than
let's
have to have a
read
letter read?
the letter.
You know, generally, people who have an issue with the trustees, they come and they tell us. This person wants us to do the dirty work,
Well-
and I don't want to do
Well, first
it.
of all, they were sitting at their home watching TV when their family was mentioned on public television during a trustees meeting. So you shouldn't be attacking them as if
No,
they
I'm
did
saying,
something wrong.
I'm saying that I am offended that I have been asked to be a part of this. I want no part of it.
You're the clerk.
It doesn't matter.
Well, she feels it's a trustee issue.
Well,
She's a
I
resident.
disagree.
You
But I
represent.
disagree. I disagree.
All right, let's.
It's not a
everybody gets
trustee
copy of the
issue.
letter.
Okay,
Oh,
that's
there.
it.
So,
Let's
so
everybody get a copy
everybody
of
will
this
get a
letter.
copy of the letter. You can look at it, Chris, and you let us
And
know.
I'll do
what you
some
think.
research into open meetings law as well. I'll acknowledge that I don't know whether or not each and every letter that comes in is required to be read in public. I'll have an answer for you guys soon.
And also, who gets to make that decision of what letters get read and which don't, or even get seen, for that matter?
What is the distribution program?
Well, this is the only time that this has happened in the 2 years I've been here. This is a very unusual situation. Everything is in our email service, everything is, it's all there, it all gets sent around. She addressed it specifically to Francis, and so I brought it to Francis.
All right. Financial update. Has anybody had a chance to look at that NI class?
Yes.
Thoughts?
Thoughts? Am I wrong that this is not a totally secure investment?
It is absolutely totally secure.
It's totally insured?
Insured,
It said low risk, not no risk.
low-risk investments.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's FDIC insured, so it does kind of cross the line from a protected asset-based investment to a speculative
Yeah.
asset-based investment, which isn't necessarily bad, but.
No, but do we,
What we found during the financial crisis in 2008 was that all securities moved together, even those that were continued low risk and value based versus speculative and high growth and high risk. The entire market moved together, which was an unusual dynamic. And I do have a little bit of personal concerns that something like that could impact the trustees' holdings. And the other point is that with certificates of deposit now actually paying a little bit of return, we would at least make something in a fully protected investment.
well,
I sent a link to you. I happen to be speaking to someone that I personally have for 30 years, and I mentioned if they had some kind of program, and I sent a link.
But those were CDs also that were
Okay,
paying a
well,
higher rate. But municipalities get a lower rate than the market rate.
We're always going to be
Always be lower.
lower.
comment
I
that
understand.
I'd like to make on this. I do have a little bit of experience being a trustee for other boards. And does this board have a policy and a protocol in place as to how their investments are aligned? Okay, because typically in a like non-for-profit organization, you would have somewhat strict guidelines for the trustees in their investment practices, such as no more than 40% of their, net investments could be in an unsecured thing, just to prevent somebody from basically, and we had it within an organization that I was in, where it all sounded good, and it was good, until it wasn't good, okay? And just realize, guys, in our investment strategies here, our strategy is not necessarily to make money. Our strategy is not to
Hold on
lose
to what
any
we
money.
have.
Okay, so I think I would temper any of our decisions along those lines. So I think before we invested in, let's say, a tool like this, that we would adopt some policies moving forward, so that we couldn't take all of our portfolio, or a future board couldn't take all of our portfolio and move it into one of these things unilaterally in the hopes, and then have a circumstance exactly like Rick is describing, where the whole market slides back and this low-risk investment is not a no-risk investment. These things do have a fluctuating
So should we
value,
be
and they
looking
do
at
mention that in the.
diversification of the type of investment that we make?
What's that?
Should we be looking at diversification of the investments that we
Well,
make
I
with different
think
institutions?
I think what you would do is in something like this, like we have in our local fire department, our benevolent, we have a situation, you cannot invest any more than 40% in an unsecured investment, okay?
Well, that makes sense.
60% has to be maintained in a FDIC-insured investment tool.
My question is, would a policy that we make apply to a future board anyway.
Well, I think that policy probably would be something that may get revisited each and every year with the resolutions.
There's also rules that municipalities have to follow.
Yes.
Everything we do right now is,
Which we wouldn't have to, right?
No, we do.
That's my only concern. I don't think it's a bad idea to look into this and perhaps move some of our monies in it, but I wouldn't recommend moving everything in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. I think it would be good to
this whole thing came
move
about,
towards
people were
some,
gonna get
moving some of it.
more return. Right now,
it's always
everything we
the
have
reason
is
for this.
totally fully
Stagnant.
covered and insured, and, and that's the kind that doesn't give you a big return. I don't know if we want to be shooting.
Slow and
the ground,
steady.
you know? Yeah.
Why don't we talk about this a little bit more
Yeah.
and see if we can't do a little research on some guidelines that are out there in other agencies and have another discussion at the next meeting?
Okay.
Would talking to Lan or something be useful, do you think?
I spoke to Len about this one, and he was all on board. The town has used it, many towns use it. It's designed for municipalities.
I think it definitely has a purpose for us. Just, I think how best to implement something new like that.
Right.
Francis, could I maybe start talking a little bit about Sag Harbor and see if John
Yeah, hopefully he
can
gets
join
here
us?
soon.
I think I can give us a good background on
Yeah.
where we are.
Please do.
So, going back to 2016, Sag Harbor Village was looking to get better control over some of the waters outside of their breakwater and the 1,500-foot jurisdiction that they had for the moorings and marine activities, so to speak, off Havens Beach and Sag Harbor Village area. So they worked with their village attorney, their harbor management committee, and I believe Fred Thiel was also involved a little bit, to craft a legislative bill to expand Sag Harbor Village's jurisdictional boundaries in the area of Sag Harbor, going eastward and northward into Northwest Harbor. So Jim and I sat in with Rick Whalen on a couple of those meetings, and the result of that, and John Parker, who's not here yet, was very instrumental in that, and John Schock of the Harbor Management Committee, they crafted the bill that everyone should have a copy of in their folder tonight, and it's the expanded Sag Harbor jurisdictional legislation. And there were some fundamental reasons for it, which was to have better control of the mooring field, better oversight of pump-out regulations, to make a safer maritime environment, to continue the kind of thriving marine services business in the area so that people can do the mooring services and continue the commerce, the waterfront commerce in Sag Harbor. Two of the main points that Jim and I weighed in with Rick pertain to the rights of East Hampton and the trustees. So that is one of the key points. Jim, did you have a chance to take a look at that? It's that paragraph there, if you want to look at it, maybe read it for everyone. But that was the end result of our specific input.
Yeah, this is S2, I don't know what the thing. This act shall not impair any rights which the trustees of the freeholders and commonalty of the town of East Hampton may possess now or in the future, whether ownership or management concerning the bottomlands within the area described in sections 1 of this act, to the extent that said expanded area lies within boundaries of the town of East Hampton and outside the village of Sag Harbor's jurisdiction prior to this act. Any regulations which the village shall enact regarding the said area shall be uniform, and this was the critical part, shall be uniform as between residents of the village, and that is of Sag Harbor, and the residents of the town of East Hampton. What the gist is here is the expanded area of their maritime jurisdiction, the ownership of the bottomland in that area. Some of it was definitively trustee bottomland, but some of it really was very questionable. And the village of Sag Harbor didn't want to argue the ownership issue with the town of East Hampton or the trustees, but they very much did want to get some control over these areas, primarily because of the pump-out issues. They had people mooring off in these areas for significant amounts of time, pretty big boats mooring in this area, and they had very little control they could exert on it. So when Rick and I attended these meetings, it really became kind of clear to us of, okay, the Village of Sag Harbor enacts this law, and ultimately, at some time, much like the town of East Hampton, they're going to be starting charging mooring fees. And the question we had is, presently, if I'm a village resident of Sag Harbor, what do I pay? And if I'm not a resident village, what do I pay? Well, like any town, the non-resident pays more. And what we thought was fair and equitable here was that the East Hampton town residents, for this particular case, would be treated with some reciprocity on this, that they would not be charged as though they were out-of-towners. Because some people from East Hampton, East Hampton residents, have moored off in these areas and anchored off in these areas for years.
But I may have missed it, but I haven't seen that stated in this law.
No, it's not, the thing that I got didn't,
It's written into the New York State legislation. So
Yeah.
it's in the legislation that is the
But-
foundation of this issue.
But-
We feel it needs to be reiterated.
I think it has
in
to
the
be
management plan.
reiterated in the management.
That's something we're going to have to, we should submit written comment. I think we have until,
Tomorrow?
no, not tomorrow. It's a little longer than that. It was 30 days from the issuance of the letter, so I think it's actually towards the end of February.
Yeah, because if it's not written into the local law, it's going to,
So it might get lost.
Yeah,
But
it's
it is
gonna
a
absolutely
legislator.
get
And then
lost.
there is a letter from the mayor, Jim, if you want to refer to that as well, where,
Is this the February 1, 2019?
no, it's an older letter that was issued to the trustees from the mayor outlining the village's commitment to working with the trustees for all future management plan amendments and
Yeah, it's like the last, second to the last
And it
paragraph.
was memorialized in a resolution by the Sag Harbor Village Board. So it's not just a letter to the trustees, it was memorialized in a resolution by their Board of Trustees. So we do have a commitment to, that in Arlene, I don't know if it got into everyone's package, but I'm sure she can send it
I meant
around.
to, but it
Yeah.
was attached.
We have one there, if anyone really wants to see it now. So we do have this foundation work. I would recommend that we submit written comment, maybe Chris, you can help us weigh in on that, so that it's clear in the Waterways Management Plan, as Jim puts it, reiterated there, and Francis. And then tomorrow night is the public hearing, and I
gonna
think,
say.
I was going to go, Jim, are you still available
Oh,
to?
what time is the public
I
hearing?
think it's at
It's 6 o'clock.
Okay, because I got a 4 o'clock, a 5 o'clock.
we have
And it's a busy week.
We have a 5 o'clock
It's a
meeting.
busy
But I
week.
have another 5 o'clock meeting,
Okay.
so I'm going to be like sitting with my earphones on.
But I'm going to head over there, and in terms of the written comment, Chris, maybe you can help us to
Is that
craft.
the same legislative act that
No, it's a
that
second
my
one.
father was referring to back in
It's a second
2005?
one. Well, I'll go into that now with the map. So historically, Sag Harbor has had an inner harbor mooring field inside the breakwater. And as the town of East Hampton has in many areas, and the village of East Hampton, they have 1,500 feet jurisdiction by default. They were set up in the 80s. The 1,500-foot town and village jurisdictional boundaries was come about in the 1980s, and there was a lot of controversy over Northwest Harbor and trustee ownership rights and the state claiming jurisdictional rights. So the new area Sag Harbor requested, and it was passed in New York State legislation, was to now allow them to regulate the mooring field and navigational activities so that there is a fairway for paddling and wakeboarding where there won't be a lot of boats moored. And then there was to be a recreation area. I have personally worked with Cornell. We've done shellfish seeding and eelgrass restoration over here. So this was going to be an area that did not have a mooring field area. It's also shoaly and rocky over there. It's not really a suitable mooring area. But this was the kind of the end result of this most recent effort to create a more professionally managed area. Ed Michaels acknowledged, I think it was a little bit of a stretch coming over from 3 Mile to really weigh in over here. The state doesn't have much of a presence. They have one boat for all of Suffolk County right now based in the Shinnecock Canal. So there really was a stretch to, and then you have mega yachts, you have mooring operators, you had a lot going on out here. So it was kind of becoming a little bit of the wild, wild west. And I think, the village effort, which I have another document, outlined the 5 or 6 points the harbor master of Sag Harbor brought to the table, which was standardized mooring tackle. They didn't even have guidelines for standardized mooring tackle in an open, exposed waterway. There was no insurance certificate required for the boats that were moored there. The harbor master didn't feel he had any real teeth in the enforcement of the pump out. So there was, 4 or 5 main points that brought about this request. And that's what brought Jim and I and Rick Whalen to the table to meet with them. And one of the things that, did transpire, which we all know, is the water testing took place. That was also, they wanted to have more of a cooperation, so to speak, between the economy and the environment, kind of a balance, which the water testing, Gobler is now there doing his baseline water testing with 5 stations. So that was a nice development that came out of it as well. So that's more or less where we are. The public hearing is tomorrow, and we do have a written comment opportunity. And I think getting our language into the plan via written comment from the clerk and council, I think, would really be appropriate. So I would volunteer to help, craft a draft to look at. And I think one of the most recent letters to us indicates the back-end date for the written public comment. So I think there is a small window of time for that.
Yeah, this was all gone over very thoroughly, and we all agreed to this, so it just seems like it's an issue with it. We have to make sure that the language is
perpetuated
in the
really
in the local
represented
law.
properly. And right now, I think it would be a little bit of a slippage if we didn't get it into the actual plan.
Yeah.
I think the language in the bill right now, as it stands, does fall a little short of the protections that the trustees would want when it comes to their jurisdiction down there. It seems like it's lacking a little bit, so I think it's a good idea to, if you do want to see the table in the future management of Northwest Harbor, I think it's important that we get that language in there and get it right.
Okay, so if you want to use that as a starting point,
Can Chris weigh in on
Chris.
this then?
Yeah, well, I'd like to use that as a starting point, and maybe Chris can draft something that,
And, yeah, absolutely, but so I
approaches that.
understand, you seem to think that the language in the state legislation is,
well, that's what came about through work with our former counsel. So he felt that that was appropriate.
okay.
Now, if you think, it needs to be a little more bullish, so to speak, then, maybe.
But am I understanding correctly what your
Well, we want
concerns
to get it, at the very least, this language into the waterways management plan. So we have the legislation, we have the commitment letter, and now we have a new management plan that is being publicly commented on tomorrow night, and there is a written comment period that runs, I believe, for another 2 weeks or so.
Yeah. Do we have a copy of the management plan?
That's Sag Harbor's, that's their plan. correct?
Sag Harbor's waterways management plan for the expanded jurisdictional area. And yes, I believe if it's not in your folder,
I don't think I got the law. I got the Sag Harbor's law, and I have from my own records,
yep.
the
So
state
this,
legislation.
so there are some amendments to it, but I'm not sure if we have a complete copy with every last amendment. Is that the
I have
latest?
the public hearing notice, and we have 30 days
Okay.
from January 8th.
It should be all right here.
We have 30 days from January 8th to, well, I don't know. That's
No,
not
there's another document that went out after that, because they had to have the public hearing
Okay, it extended.
again on the
It
12th.
got extended.
The letter that announces the public 12th public hearing asked for comment 30 days from the issuance of
Right.
that letter. So there's another letter,
I didn't
Arlene.
receive anything else.
It's in the package.
Okay.
If you double check it, there is a letter that states that we want written public comment from sometime in the end of January.
Yeah, isn't it this, which is in our package?
I think so.
Because this says 30 days at the
And what's the
bottom.
date of the letter?
February 1st, 2019, and this is in our.
30 days from the date of this letter.
February 12th, 30 days from February 12th.
Yes.
There we go. So we do have a little bit of time to craft written comment I thought it would be helpful if a couple of our members were at the meeting tomorrow night to listen to the discussion and public comment and possibly weigh in, verbally as well.
Oh, no, let me read this, okay?
Sure.
Please note, the public hearing was continued to the Board of Trustees, February 12, 2019, where the board will consider further testimony regarding the proposed local law. To the extent possible, please provide any referral response regarding this local law to the village within the next 30 days. Thank you for your consideration. This was dated February 1st.
Right, that's the letter I'm referring
So, March 2nd.
March 2nd. So it gives us a little bit of time. We have one more meeting. We could have something crafted and reviewed by our board, and then have a certified letter sent over to the village, if that
One
made
thing-
sense to everyone.
One thing I didn't understand when I saw this is that, I'm on this county aquaculture lease program review committee. And my understanding is that the state ceded ownership of the bottom of Peconic and Gardner's Bay for the purpose of shellfish culture. So, that's an issue for the county, I guess, if they feel that they have jurisdiction here through that
Well,
law.
Now, we don't have the whole map of Northwest Harbor. I thought the only areas that were listed were over here, more in the Shelter Island water side.
I believe the law says they ceded the bottom of the bottomlands of
Right.
Peconic
But
and Gardner's
what-
Bay.
what-
Right, well, this is neither of those. This is Northwest Harbor, which is trustee bottomland throughout here.
I'm not sure the maps, though, in that law necessarily make that distinction.
Yeah, well, we
Hey,
should
let me
weigh
tell
in
you-
on that
let me tell
further
you-
then.
Let me tell you the reason I'm thinking is, this aquaculture lease thing has run into resistance where it exists in Promised Land, Lazy Point. And, I've been thinking of ways suggestions that could be made to maybe, satisfy people. And one of them would be to possibly move lease sites or consider lease sites off undeveloped land. Now, that may include, and if we feel we have rights in Northwest Harbor, and if this is considered part of Northwest Harbor, we may have influence in suggesting lease sites, at least theoretically, at least for review, off undeveloped areas around Northwest Harbor.
Well, Northwest Harbor is all areas that are shellfished by commercial fishermen.
I understand that. Yeah, I understand
It's
that.
not something that personally I feel is an option that I would be able to support.
I may not either, but I'm just saying, if it's put on the table, would, this authorization in effect take it off the table?
Well, it creates a multi-jurisdictional situation
Yeah.
like we have on the village beaches in the village. So it's more complicated when you have multiple agencies weighing in this area, which we now have.
What this whole thing was going to do was
But this is only
basically
this
under the
area.
navigation law, was giving Sag Harbor the right to control moorings and speed and operation of vessels within their thing. It doesn't go to ownership of the bottom in any way.
It's also to protect the environment. If you look at their whole waterways plan and their waterfront plan, it does put a heavy emphasis on protection of the environment and natural resources.
It will also,
Which is great.
yeah, it will allow them, and you probably mentioned this, to extend their pump-out authority.
That was one of the biggest
Yeah, that was.
reasons for
Yep.
this.
Yeah, and that made
Yeah,
sense.
you were on the board then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was
Yeah.
part of it.
this whole thing made a lot of sense.
So. But the maps I saw, I don't think there was anything, at least in this area, but maybe I
There
didn't.
aren't leases in these areas.
Oh, okay.
But what I'm saying, if leases are being, if people are considering, if the committee is considering moving leases,
I don't think the
what
county.
should and shouldn't be on the
Yeah,
table?
I don't think the county ever considered this area, particularly in 1895, because
It didn't.
it was clearly under the,
It didn't, but does
control of
that
the
mean
trustees.
it now can't?
well, that would be a decision for the board. That would be a decision for our board to make.
what the county can consider and can't consider?
They'd have to, in my opinion, they'd have to apply to the trustees to ask if the trustees would consider the bottom land being used for those purposes. And that's why they never went there, because they didn't, feel that the state had any right to cede the property to the county.
Yeah, it's a can of worms.
And would
It's a
they
big
have
can
to-
of worms.
And would they have to ask Sag Harbor
John?
as well? If Sag Harbor creates this management plan?
In here, yes, again, multi-jurisdiction. That's, I think, part of the crux of what we've been talking about tonight. So, yeah. But I think there's so much boating activity here, John, I think it would be a very, very poor choice of an area.
It very well may be.
You know what I mean?
I'm just,
You've got mega yachts dropping anchored here, you have mooring operators operating here, you have wakeboard operators, you have paddle boarding, you have sailing schools coming off Havens Beach. I mean, this is a really busy
Congested
area.
area.
Well, that's the reason they wanted to get some control in here in the first place.
Yeah, yep.
All
That
right.
was on the issues list that was presented.
I'm just looking at the recreation area off an undeveloped piece there.
Yep, yep. It's not
How
a huge
heavily
area.
used that is, I'm not aware.
Yeah.
Havens Beach?
No.
It's east of Havens. I mean, this is popular for paddleboarders that want to get away from the busy area. There is some shellfish aquaculture going on in the bottom there. We have done seeding projects with Cornell there. And there is natural sets of scallops there. I've dove for them and caught them there myself. So it's a nice piece of bottom land. It'd be nice to have an area in here that's available to the public to go shellfishing. But if you want to talk about that some more, I mean, certainly let's have the conversation.
I'm just kind of wondering, what's on the table, what's off the table?
Yeah.
Well, I would,
And who makes that decision?
Well, I think we do.
Yeah, it's our
I
bottom
think,
line.
I think at this point, that would be an issue.
Isn't that
would
arguable?
No,
It
no,
is,
but I think
but
at
do they
this
wanna
point,
argue it?
that would be
I
an
don't think
issue.
so. I've got a lot of
that-
documentation that shows we have a very strong standing.
But I think at this point, given our relationship with the Village of Sag Harbor, that this is something that we have mutually agreed upon, that any changes in these areas in terms of use, or that would be something that we would negotiate with the village, or in concert with the village,
When the time comes.
when the time comes. Now, if Suffolk County turns around and says, hey, we want to write leases in this area, I would feel very strongly against that, because I think the use of this area has already been pretty well defined by the state legislation that extended Sag Harbor's jurisdiction in this area, and the Sag Harbor, the management plan that was crafted by the Harbor Management Committee in Sag Harbor. So
This is,
I think you'd be basically pissing up a rope here if you wanted to commercially
Put leases, aquaculture
put
leases.
leases out in this area. And John, you can speak to that in just a second.
So, John, thank you for joining us. We have John Parker here from the Sag Harbor Harbor Management Committee. And John, we just took a few minutes to give a little background of the approach of the Harbor Management Committee to the trustees with the proposed legislation in 2016, the letter from the mayor, and the resolution that was passed by the trustees of Sag Harbor committing to work with the trustees on future planning activities, and a little background on the need for a little more regulation here and enforcement of pump out, et cetera. And then it dovetailed, John had a question about, the Suffolk County aquaculture leasing program, and is that something that might be an appropriate use in this area or other areas of Northwest Harbor? And that's about where we've gotten. I don't know if any of the board members have any specific questions for John. We are planning to come tomorrow night. We are planning to submit written comment by the March 2nd deadline. And just, if you'd like to come up and maybe say a few words, or if anyone has any questions for John, I'd like to turn the mic over to John,
it
please.
seems like the main issues come up, we want to make sure the language in your local law matches the language in the state legislation. As far as, rights of, of freeholders in commonality to have the same rights over there as Sag Harbor Village residents.
Yes, and there is, no specific language in our local law, or the proposed amendments to the local law that says that. It's in the state law, however. And actually, there was some discussion as to whether we needed to put it in the village law. And one of the village attorneys came to the conclusion that if it was in the state law, we didn't have to repeat it in the village law.
But,
However,
John,
if you have comments on that.
If there's going to be any enforcement of your regulations there, they're not going to refer to the state law, they're going to refer to the local law. So I feel strongly that it needs to be in there.
I would as well, and I think it would improve everybody's relationship here. Because if somebody's actually going to get cited or be charged a different amount for moorings, that's going to depend on that individual going back and researching themselves the state law to kind of enforce their rights there. So I think it makes sense, really, to reiterate that in the new, in the
local law.
changes
I agree
to the
with you.
local law.
Absolutely.
And I'm happy to pass that along, but I would suggest that you do so as
We
well.
will, yes, we will, absolutely.
And because I think you have more weight if you're appearing than I do before the village board as just a member of the harbor committee. But I'm happy to pass that along. There's no plan to charge for moorings out there. So that mitigates some of the concern you have, because if you're not charging and you're not limiting anchoring or permits, then there's no, question of equal treatment, because essentially it's open to, it's open to all. And the regulations.
At this time.
At this time. And I agree with you to look toward the future, and some of the things that we've recommended in terms of from the Harbor Committee are looking at it not because there's a problem, last summer, but because there could be a problem, 2 summers, from now, or 3 summers from now, and we want to be prepared for that. We don't want to be looking back and saying, oh, we wish we'd had this regulation in effect. I mean, I don't know how many of you have seen the Sag Harbor Express article, on this, but I think you have had passed out the proposed regulations, and there's been comments on it, and there's been a village board work session, and there's some pushback against some of the regulations that have been proposed, in terms of the moorings and anchoring in the area. And I think that's going to be the main contention. There's been some mention by the harbor master as to, he thinks that keeping track of all boats who come in and anchor is maybe required, might increase his workload, and that would be an issue. So I think we have to look at that in terms of a balance as to what's too much regulation and what's not enough. As I say, I'm looking at it from a protective point of view of the environment and of the bay. I've had boats on that bay since, I don't know, 1952 maybe. My father built me a dinghy from a kit. My current boat is a 62 Boston Whaler that I've had out there since 1962, and hope to have it there for, at least 10 or 15 more years. So I'm concerned with changes and the number of boats, the size of boats, that kind of thing, and I'd like to have regulations, and what we proposed was regulations that we put into effect that we think, if we have to limit it, there's no intention of limiting it right now, but I think we have to look ahead from the point of view of, all right, we had about 50 boats there last year. What if next year there's 100 that show up? Well, what's too many? What's too congested? What the type of boats, the uses that are going on. So we're hoping to have regulations that will, looking ahead, be able to control that and preserve the traditional waterfront uses, et cetera. So, and again, we'd love to have your feedback on that.
John, I have a quick question that just occurred to me. There wouldn't be any liability, would there be, on our part with the boats being moored on Trustee Bottom and something happened? I I mean, I understand in a perfect world, but,
Well,
I think
Brian,
for owners,
one of the things that
we're liable.
precipitated this was the fact that right now, the trustee, the metes and bounds of the trustee ownership was somewhat in question, okay? And the Village of Sag Harbor and the trustees had already encountered situations where you had boats that basically became derelict in the area, and there was no real authority to take responsibility for them. So I think this is a step. This is a step in that
And
direction.
that's the insurance requirement, which includes like an environmental certificate. So every boat that is moored there, I believe just like in 3 Mile.
I was here when you first came a number of years ago.
But 3 years and 1 month, I think, from,
Yeah, time flies, right, when you're having fun. But I picked up on the environmental end of it, and I haven't wavered in that. The more boats that can be pumped out, the better the environment is. And you eloquently explained to us that these boats were coming in, and it was questionable, or maybe not, that their waste was hitting the water. So that hasn't changed, and you know, I've been in favor of this almost from the beginning, you know.
well, it's a concern. And again, it's still, going back to that time, we were talking about a situation where the DEC was coming in once a year to check a few of the boats. And a report would be, we checked 10 boats and we only found 3 in violation. You multiply that by 5 and how many were in violation in terms of the Y valve, the simple check of the Y valves. I mean, that's still up in the air in terms of how much enforcement there's going to be of that, whether this will lead to more rigorous enforcement. We hope it will. From those of us who are looking from an environmental point of view, but it's not necessarily, guaranteed. It puts a structure in place where it could happen. To answer your liability question, though, I would say it doesn't change it. Because if assuming you own the bottom land, you own it now, you own it before these regulations, you owned it before the state law changed, so you're certainly not going to have any more liability. You might have an argument that you have less, that the village takes over some of that liability depending upon what type of issue comes up.
That's why the tackle standards, the insurance requirement, these become mutual interest points for everyone.
And I think that it would be fair for me to say that some of those things that are in our recommendations, I mean, are up in the air at the moment. We're looking at recommendations from the Harbor Committee, and actually that the Harbor Committee made actually 2 years ago. And don't ask me what the delay has been, because I can't really tell you other than that it's occurred. But part of that may be because of some pushback in terms of putting this into effect and enforcing it. So for those parts of that you're in favor of and want to make sure, goes into effect, speak up.
John, I have a couple of questions. I'm just thinking, you said if there were 75 boats this year and then next year there were 100, is there a quota as to how many boats can be moored in the waters? And if there is a quota, is there a breakdown of how many motorboats and how many sailboats? Is there a distribution of how many permits are issued to a certain style of boat? Or just first come, first served?
But the answer is no. I mean, there is the ability in the regulations as proposed, there is the ability to set limits where necessary, and I think the language is for health, safety,
Right.
considerations, environmental considerations, included.
There's also, the DEC will come in and regulate mooring areas if they reach a certain density. They have what's called a dilution factor. We went through it with 3 Mile Harbor, and in 10 feet of water, it's about an acre a boat. That they want a certain number of gallons of, with the, dilution factors, otherwise they'll close an area to shell fishing.
Yeah.
So that would probably be a limiting factor in harbor.
Right now, what I can tell you is there, on latest count, I believe there were 28 moorings in that area. And for the last 2 summers, I was counting on average a maximum of about 50 boats. So basically, you were having, 28 on moorings, and then you were having another 22 or so that were, anchoring. Now, what makes this kind of complicated is that, and it was complicated in terms of doing the regulations, is that the large boats don't moor, they anchor.
Right.
When you have a 200-footer come in, they drop anchor. On the other hand, you have 25-footers that come in for the weekend and drop anchor. So that's why this language about mooring and anchoring, and you're trying to do equivalence a bit between, okay, the 200-footer, is at anchor, he's not moored, but if he's there for the summer and this kind of thing. It's the larger boats that there's more concern over, that there's concern by residents, frankly. It's a lot of foreign flag vessels. Too, which raises issues, and some of which I know they're looking into right now as to looking back and saying, wait a second, we said we'd do this, but are there regulations under Homeland Security for what we have to do for foreign flag vessels if we're taking jurisdictional control over that area? So there's various questions. It's much less settled than I would like to have seen it at this point, but at least we're talking about it, and I think that's good. And we'd like to engage with the trustees in terms of that that discussion. And how you think it should be. I mean, that was the original agreement that we talked about, was to have input by the trustees, and I want to, I personally want to live up to it, and I hope that that we're all going to, to the betterment of the area and the environment. Again, what I personally try to look ahead as is what's preventing something from happening, right now. Right now, before we have regulations into effect, what's preventing there being, 100 moorings, next summer?
Exactly.
What's preventing somebody from, Hampton Bays, from putting in 50 moorings and then advertising them, for rent for the summer? What's preventing a cruise ship, or more than one cruise ship from coming in? I mean, cruise ships aren't very far away, by the way. I mean, the American Cruise Lines, I believe it is, has cruise ships that go up the New England coast, and there's close as Rhode Island. There's another cruise ship that comes down and makes a big circle from the St. Lawrence back to New York, and you can actually see it go by in the Sound. So that's not far away. I'd like to see us have regulations, so if somebody wants to do that, we at least have an opportunity to look at it and make a decision on it, rather than being sort of stuck with it because we didn't have sufficient regulations in effect.
Are cruise ships included in here? I mean, as a future regulation?
Well, I'm probably the only one who's mentioned that, but
Yeah, but it's an interesting idea, because more and more you see them come into ports that once were not.
And around the world, they have wrecked
been
ports.
mentioned in my
People will tell you that they went to Fuji and was wrecked by cruise ships and, this kind of thing. They thought they were going to a remote island and,
They have small, there's actually been, it's not an issue of Sag Harbor alone, let's put it that way.
yeah, there are
Of any harbor. I mean,
there are small cruise ships now that, yes, the rivers and small, but we think that would be covered by commercial vessels requiring a permit, by vessels. There's some language in there that vessels over 55 feet will have to check in and get a permit, in advance, which there was some effort to keep this somewhat loose and unregulated so that every 30-foot sloop didn't have to get a permit in advance and could come in and stay for the weekend or even the week without going through a permit process. But that's sort of a balancing, act as to what point you're requiring, people to come in and show, give them all your information, and if we're requiring insurance, at what point do we say, hey, if you're going to stay beyond a certain length of time, we have to, show an insurance certificate, et cetera. And that's kind of up in the air at the moment, because again, there's discussion on both sides of that right now.
John, there is a point I want to bring up tonight, and I'd like to bring up tomorrow night as well, is the use of technology to help do these reservations or registrations when someone visits. There are several communities like Sag Harbor that are using technology to manage far greater numbers of reservations and registrations very efficiently. And I've put together some of that information before, and I'd like to bring it again tomorrow night. 3 years ago, 90% of the reservations in the boating industry were done with paper and pencil. Today, 90% of the reservations are done electronically. So people who are traveling with their boats are doing the reservations on their phones now. So there's a huge opportunity to apply technology to some of the administrative concerns that have been raised. So I'm going to bring some information tomorrow night that I'd like to share with everyone and bring that point up. I think it's important that people that are on these boats, their whole profile's already in their phone, and with a click, they can register. And then you can get a spreadsheet that lists daily, weekly, monthly, annually of everyone that registered. So it's pretty easy to do today. It's pretty well documented. So for what it's worth.
I think that's a great point, and I think that maybe the village isn't thinking in those terms, or thinking in the more traditional, bring your paperwork down to Village Hall, and, I can tell you that's sort of the case in terms of looking at what the workloads would be to do certain things, and we should look at that. And
There
I
are
think
good case studies, Edgartown and other communities have vibrant maritime communities much bigger than this, that employ a lot of people, have a robust, beautiful waterfront community. And, they do a good job balancing the administration, the economy, and the environment. Great shellfish programs.
And I think it's relevant to look at what people in the sailing community, yachting community who travel, what they're used to, in terms of what their routine is usually when they're going to different, to different ports. Because, on one hand, we don't want to discourage people from coming, but on the other hand, if it's something that they do when they go to every port, if it's normal to them, then it's not going to be discouraging. It might have been 5 years ago or 3 years ago when they were doing it by paper, but if it's simply something that they're doing from their smartphones, and they have their insurance certificate in there that they can just email, I mean.
Seems it's also a lot less work for someone to do, and it's more efficient. It's what's used everywhere.
These systems are great.
Yeah.
They've really
Sounds
come a
like
long
it.
way.
It's like a hotel.
Yep, it's like a hotels.com for boats.
Trivago, but on the water.
Well, again, things are changing. I mean, again, from when I was here 3 years ago, things may have changed, and we need to, need to try to keep up. But
I'd like to just reiterate what Francis said about having the law in place that is local, because I think if we have an issue, as Francis has pointed out, that they're not going to have to go to the state law, that it's right there, and it's like bundling up and making sure that we're protected as well. And I think if it's right there and it's handy, that's a much better and more secure.
It's the old belt and
legal.
suspenders.
sure, better off having both.
Yeah, I think we should start out from the beginning with having it all in one place for us.
So, we're definitely going to work on that with Chris for written comment, and maybe tomorrow night, Susan, we can
I'm going to
speak about
come
it
so I
a little
can listen and
What time
learn.
is the meeting tomorrow night?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
bit. You off tomorrow?
No, I actually start my meds tonight.
And,
But
I believe
I'm not a
it's,
zombie.
I never know completely what the agenda is going to be, but I believe it's one of the public hearings that will be early on the public hearings are usually at the beginning of the meeting on the agenda.
Can we get a copy of the agenda during the day tomorrow? Or is it?
I hope so.
Is it on the website?
Well, the village just upgraded its website, so there've been
Might
some,
be a little shaky.
when I last looked,
So is
there
ours.
was some issues, but
Maybe Arlene could, call down there tomorrow and have it forwarded,
sure, if you want to, verify that.
and then she could shoot it out to us.
If you can, want to verify, it may be on the website by now. When I looked over the weekend, it wasn't, and it was a little difficult trying to navigate on the
I know
new website.
One meeting I attended, the public comment portion was at the end, but I think this is a bigger public comment meeting.
Yes, the public comments are normally at the end, but when there's a public hearing on a local
Larger issue.
law, there are usually comments as part of that public hearing, rather than being, at the end of the meeting.
Hopefully it'll be first.
So, and it's also, I believe our septic upgrade law is also on for a continued public hearing at the same time. We have a similar individual requiring the low nitrogen systems law to, well, they're right at the same time. I don't know whether they approved it yet or not, but I know the Village of East Hampton had that on their agenda at the, in their January meeting, and I don't know whether they've had their February meeting yet. But it's a similar law to what's being proposed there and to what East Hampton Town has in effect. It just happened that the villages, because of separate corporate entities, the villages weren't covered by what was passed by the towns. So we're trying to get up to speed on that. And again, another environmental, improvement that we can hopefully. And we're also looking at expanding the sewer districts. You may have read an article in the Sag Harbor Express, last week's Sag Harbor Express, in regards to that. The sewage treatment plant is working only at about 50% capacity, and the nitrogen output is much less than even the new low nitrogen systems. So in theory, anyway, assuming that the plant is working, up to speed, and we've done testing and have some reports that show that it is, the way to get the most reduction in nitrogen is to expand the number of properties which are hooked up to the sewage treatment plant, rather than the individual low nitrogen systems. Because the individual low nitrogen systems, I think the requirement is 19 parts per milliliter or something like that. Up in the sewage treatment plant, requirement is that it be 10 or under, and the test results are showing that it's 3 or 4 or 5. So it's maybe a quarter of what the individual systems would be. So, but anyway, we're working with that, and hopefully we'll get some progress there too. And we'd like to get the eelgrass back at some point. And everything that goes with it.
So come back in March and hear from Kim Barber, end of March. She's coming in from Cornell to talk about eelgrass project, yeah.
Yes, I think I did hear her talk about that at one point previously, but that's going to be at your...
Yeah, she's coming in to report on what the progress is on that.
Okay, and she's been involved in the seeding?
Yes.
Yes, I've talked to her, yes.
All right, well, we'll see you tomorrow night.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Guys, is there still a joint committee consisting of 2 trustees to harbor management?
Well, it hasn't met regularly, so it's something that we probably should revisit, but I will, as an individual member of that committee, I will be attending tomorrow. Jim's available, and he wants to attend.
I'll make it.
And I'm just going because I'm going, as a trustee.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at this 2016 letter from the village, basically saying that this committee will be, working on the management plan, not only when they implemented it, but in the future as well. So there's an opportunity there to ensure that when it comes to management of this area, it's worked on by a committee consisting of 2 of you guys and 2 trustees, and that might be a way to ensure, we get what we want implemented.
We will revisit that.
Yeah, great.
We worked regularly and met when we were working on the state law.
Okay.
And haven't really met since, although we've been in touch back and forth.
It's a little more informal. We did have some communication when the waterways plan was originally being drafted, but it sat dormant for a little while, and we did lose a little momentum.
Okay. Sounds good. Well,
thanks.
All right, thank you. I apologize for being late. The Harbor Committee meeting was still going strong, and probably, I'm sure, still going, because they still had a number of items on the, on the agenda, so.
Get home safe. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Does anybody have anything else?
I'd like to make a motion, we close.
Amen.
Got a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
We'll talk about this before the next meeting, maybe we can